Hello and welcome to the Isaac Newton Institute podcast. My name is Dan Aspel, I'm the Communications Manager here, and today I am joined by
Lesley Ward.
So Lesley Ward is a participant in a current programme, and I've got it written down in front of me so I can remember the wording exactly. It is the Complex Analysis, Techniques, Applications and Computations programme. So Lesley, as an introduction to you, there are two main things we need to know about you, I suppose, at this stage. One is that you are an Associate Professor at the University of South Australia, and the other, which is one of the main reasons we're speaking to you now, is that you're also the recipient of the Kirk Distinguished Visiting Fellowship. But until we get onto that subject, let's speak a little bit more about you. So tell me about your time in Australia and how you come to be at the Institute right now.
Well, I grew up in Australia and I did my undergraduate degree there and then left for the United States where I did the PhD and a postdoc and a permanent position. So I returned to Australia in 2006 to join the University of South Australia. So I've been back in Australia for quite some time, now in the beautiful city of Adelaide.
Whereabouts did you study in the States?
At Yale, that's where I did my PhD on the East Coast. Yeah, not so far from here by an Australian metric.
No, indeed. Yeah. What a wonderful collection of places, though. And so you obviously are working at the University of South Australia, which seems to be very fulfilling work for you.
Yes. So I trained as a theoretical mathematician or a pure mathematician. I also have some other strings to my bow where I do industry projects working with companies, with teams of undergraduate students. So I do practical applied projects with real world impact. And in fact, most of my current department, most of my colleagues are focused more on the industrial maths and applied maths side of things. But I still also maintain a really active theoretical mathematical research program with collaborators, mostly at other institutions in Australia and around the world. And so one of those collaborators is one of the organisers of this complex analysis program here at the Institute. Mm-hmm. And we've had a joint project running for a couple of years now. So I think it's through him that I've been invited to be here. And I'm delighted to and honoured to hold the Kirk Visiting Fellowship as well.
It's an interesting series of facts you've told me then. So does your work directly relate to complex analysis? It sounded like you cover quite a lot of bases with your research.
Yeah, so in the industry projects, I don't think many of them have used much complex analysis so far. It is surprising how far you can get with practical projects that have a real world impact and that companies are willing to pay for with undergraduate level mathematics, maybe first and second year mathematics, linear algebra, calculus, a bit of statistics. Those sorts of things go a very long way in solving real world problems. And so far we haven't needed complex analysis there. In the more theoretical parts of my research, I work in two areas actually. So one of them is complex analysis, and that I've been doing since my PhD days. My PhD was in complex analysis, although a different area from what I'm doing now, different sub-area. And then the other research area is what's called harmonic analysis, which is what these days the name that is used for Fourier theory and Fourier analysis, which is what I'm going to talk about in the Kirk lecture in a couple of weeks' time.
Yep.
That's a
we're promoting, so I'll try and attach it to this podcast as well, so everyone can see if it's forthcoming or indeed watch the video afterwards.
Sure.
So it sounds like, as I say, a really broad mixture of things which are your specialty. And you were speaking today, I believe, weren't you, which is obviously going to be a different talk to the one that you're giving in 2 weeks' time. So tell me about what you were speaking about today within the complex analysis program.
Right, so I was talking about a problem that I've been working on with collaborators for quite some time, and it's about, if you imagine on a piece of paper, if you drew a shape, some sort of a loop, and you looked, it might have some corners or something like that, but think of the region that you've outlined with your loop, and pick a spot in that region, and then release what we call Brownian particles from that spot, which means they're particles that are, they wander randomly in any direction. So if you tracked one particle, it would give you a kind of very wiggly, loopy path that would cross itself a lot. But eventually it will hit the loop you originally drew. It will hit the edge of your region. And the object that we study, what we do is we keep track of exactly where on the edge of your region did that particle hit, how far was that spot from the starting point that it started off at? And from that, we can build what we call a mathematical function associated to the region you drew and the place where you started. And our question is, well, if I graphed that function, can I tell from that what shape was it that you drew? Can I uniquely determine, can I be sure, if you just hand me that function without showing me what the particles did, would I be able to reconstruct the region that you had originally drawn? So this is, it has some connections with practical things like the way that temperature is distributed in your region, given how you might heat or cool bits of the edge of the region, that sort of thing. So it has some practical connections, but really we're just interested in it because it's really fascinating and we want to understand what's going on. We've studied many, many aspects of this problem, what these functions we build can look like, what they can't look like, why. If you have a corner in the edge of your domain, how does that show up in the shape of the function? Would I be able to tell? And the answer is more or less yes. And but it's a beautiful problem that touches many other areas of pure maths and applied maths. And I was really thrilled today when I explained some of the history of what we have achieved on aspects of this problem, together with the new stuff that that working with my collaborator here, Darren Crowdy, who's one of the organisers, has enabled us to do. It's opened up a whole new part of this problem that we didn't have the techniques to do before. So that's been very exciting. So I explained all of that. And then there were a lot of questions, which was great. So you always feel you've given a good talk if there's really a lot of questions connecting to different parts of what you've said, and that went on into the coffee break afterwards. So I was extremely satisfied that I'd sort of showcased what I wanted to show.
Yeah, it must be really fascinating, as you say, to see the way that an idea implants in the minds of others, and indeed to see some of the applications which might arise, which there must be many which it wouldn't necessarily occur to you because it's not your field.
Yes, well, that's, I think, a real strength of the way that this Newton Institute organises its programs, so that they've, when I started, when the organiser talked to me about coming and I started looking at what is the ethos of it, when I understood that it was going to be, yes, mathematicians, yes, theoretical and applied mathematicians, but also physicists and engineers, I was just really thrilled because for us, that's really unusual to get that high-level interaction with people from other disciplines who've got some sort of common interest. So you have a starting point in, some part of complex analysis in this case. But it's rare to have that interaction. And then even just within mathematics itself, I mean, I've talked so much today since the seminar I gave with a bunch of different people who've got different but overlapping expertise who can interpret what I've done in their own specialty and, give me some of those links. So I'm excited about that.
This, I'm sure, is exactly the mission of the Isaac Newton Institute, to encourage exactly what you're saying, this kind of interaction across disciplines and indeed people from all over the world as well, because you've travelled geographically as far as one can, more or less, to get here, and yet I think the breakup normally is about a third from the UK, a third from Europe, and a third from the rest of the world of participants at the Institute. So doubtless you would have been speaking to people from many different home locations.
Yes.
And so it's fascinating to hear about this. So how long have you been here, and how long are you going to be here as part of the programme?
Well, we're just at the end of my second week. I would have loved to stay for the whole program, which I think is 3.5 or 4 months, but for various reasons to do with my commitments at home, I will be only here for about 6 weeks.
Oh, well, still, you're only a third of the way into that run, and you've already had these positive experiences. So
yes, it's
obviously
been great.
Many more to come. Can I ask you now about the Kirk Visiting Distinguished Fellowship? Because I have discussed it before with other recipients, and it's new this year, and I believe there are 5 recipients this year. The idea being, and it was the reason it's called Kirk is because it's named after Dr. Ewan Kirk. He was a member of the management committee and a philanthropist as well. So the idea of it is that it supports underrepresented groups in mathematics. And as I say, it just so happens that there are 5 recipients this year and that all of them are women. So there are many statistics we could give to back this up, including our own here at the Institute. But obviously there is anyone within mathematics and most of the physical sciences will see a drop-off in the gender balance the higher up the tree, so to speak, you get, which is obviously unacceptable. And you have undergraduate level, it tends to be quite even. And as I say, the further you get, the fewer women you see. The idea of the Kirk Fellowship is to give visibility to senior women in mathematics, in this case. So now that I've given a long-winded introduction to it, how do you feel about being the recipient of the award?
Honoured. Delighted to join the company of the other Kirk Fellows to date. And I think it opens up a chance to have a lot of impact. So one thing that I'm doing during my stay here is to promote some events to build community among the women and gender diverse participants in our programs here at the Institute. And also yesterday we ran an event for the early career researchers, so students and people who completed their doctorates recently within the last few years. And so a lot of the factors that inhibit and discourage people from underrepresented groups, a lot of them are structural, a lot of them are societal, some of them are individual, but and in my view, to get to parity, to get to appropriate levels of representation, one has to understand the problem as a very multifaceted problem and be prepared to take a very multifaceted approach to it, and be prepared to work over a long period of time to get closer to equality or equal participation.
That sounds very realistic.
Yes, I think
it sounds as though I believe you've sort of thought about this and worked on this kind of issue quite a lot before being given this award.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. So definitely. Tell me more about that, because you hinted at it before we started recording, and I'd love to hear more. So what kind of work have you been doing in this field beforehand?
Well, to start sort of chronologically, I won't bore you with a complete list because that would take much too long, but at every institution where I was a student or where I've worked, I have either set up or supported some sort of peer support group. So when I was an undergraduate student, that was a long time ago, and we were not at anything like parity of women and men among the undergraduate students in mathematics at that time. And one of my lecturers asked me if I would organise a group that could meet from time to time of the women who were studying mathematics, which I did. And that was, I think there were about 10 women in the pool that we could have invited, and all of them came to the first meeting, which is the only meeting I've ever organised where everybody in the target group actually came. So there was a perceived need and a perception that this would be a benefit. And so we continued to meet regularly. So I think this sort of peer support, just feeling that you are not alone, is really helpful. And, in that situation, at that time, at that institution, we did not have any women on the academic staff in our discipline. And that continued when I went to graduate school in the United States at my institution there. So actually there was no existence proof, so to speak, that one could become an academic mathematician and a woman at the same time. Yeah. We actually literally had never seen that. And so one thing that we did there that was very practical was occasionally a speaker who came to give a talk at our university was a woman. And so we used to always invite them to come and have lunch with us. And then... so for instance, that was how I met my first pregnant mathematician, which was something, you wouldn't have ever put those words in the same phrase before. But then we went, oh, I see, it's possible to be a mathematician who gives a real seminar about interesting maths and who is also pregnant. So those cognitive schemas of, as they're often called, of sort of the mental construct of your idea of mathematician and your idea of pregnant person, say, are pretty far apart. If you look at the collection of attributes that make those up, they're pretty far apart. And so to be able to instantiate them and just see somebody who's in both makes you realise, okay, so it is possible to do both of those things, to have a family life. And
it's so vivid to hear you describe that. The idea, the very basic concept of a female pregnant mathematician is not something that you conceived or seen, witnessed, knew to exist. I've never heard it put so precisely as that. And yeah, so sorry I interrupted. Please continue.
Oh, well.
So you've moved on from, you have continued throughout your career to form these groups where people can be helped to realise that they're not alone.
Yes, so I think that's really important. And we also realised pretty quickly that it's important to have mathematical content when you are having these groups. So the first meeting, yes, sometimes people have things they want to vent, and that mutual support is really important. But then also what you can do with those peer support groups, and this could be just a few students at your organisation getting together once a week or something over a lunch or a coffee, but take turns to give little talks about some mathematical thing to each other. Find a whiteboard and give a little 10-minute explanation of, I don't know, the Fourier series of the sawtooth function or something like that. And in that way, because we had also barely ever seen a woman explaining mathematics on a board. This was before YouTube and anything like that. And apart from those few seminar speakers who were women, we had probably literally never seen that. So I think a big part of this is supporting people to develop agency, the ability to act in their own lives. And part of that is to be the one who's up there at the board explaining and sort of subliminally saying, I know something about this enough that I can say something interesting that you might all find interesting. And if you've only ever been a spectator watching your professors and lecturers explain things at the board, that already is quite a hard transition to make. But so do it in a nice, safe environment with some friends. And it doesn't have to be women only, but if you're going to do a women's group, include some content where you take turns to talk about stuff. And it could be something you've read. It doesn't have to be part of your thesis project or anything, or it could be something original that you've done or some work in progress.
And obviously you were, by the sounds of it, at the very beginning of this stage of drawing the people together, helping each other to realise that that you can continue in this career. But obviously being one of those 10 at the very beginning must be the hardest part. What kept you going at that stage? Was it purely the love of mathematics, that you just knew that you belonged there? Because it must be easy to feel as though you don't.
Well, yes, so we could talk about the imposter syndrome till the cows come home. So everybody feels the imposter syndrome. At least every woman I've ever asked about it feels it. And that's, for listeners who may not be familiar with this idea, it's that feeling that you might get, especially in a situation where everyone or most other people in that context are not like you in some way. So you might feel, I don't belong here, my work's not interesting, I can't compare with those people, I should just go home. I'll never pass this exam. They'll find me out. They'll find out that I'm...
All very familiar feelings.
All of those things. Yeah. And you know what? It gets better, but it doesn't go away. And in fact, earlier this week, I was talking to another woman speaker in this workshop that we've just had. We've just had an intensive 1-week workshop as part of this longer program. And I said, I'm having a bout of the imposter syndrome. I'm speaking on Friday, but at the moment, right today, I think my stuff is not interesting, and, how can I compare with all these people? Meanwhile, once I give the talk, people are saying, oh, that was really interesting, and oh, I really liked your delivery, and gosh, it connects to this other thing. So it's not based in fact, but it is a psychological thing that happens, that is a well-studied psychological phenomenon. And there are things you can do to combat it, especially forms of cognitive behavioural therapy where you can compare the thoughts and feelings with some objective, realistic things. So a little bit of do-it-yourself cognitive behavioural therapy would be to compare what you're feeling with the reality. So I could say to myself on Tuesday, as I did, well, let's just compare this. Last time you gave a talk about this, people really liked it. They thought it was worthwhile. And so you can address these things by putting them side by side. Okay, I've talked a lot about imposter syndrome, but it's a thing, and it's not just women who feel it. It's basically anybody who's from some sort of underrepresented
Well, indeed,
group.
but it applies so perfectly to this situation, as you say. Yeah.
So I think the thing to think about there is that the task is to work out how to manage yourself so that you can still deliver, so that you can still do the work. You have to find some ways to deal with these feelings that come from structural factors outside yourself about, the fact that, the Institute is doing really well on gender, but it's still about 1 in 6 of the speakers in this week-long workshop were women. I think about 20% of the participants are women.
Yeah.
And then for, other groups such as gender diverse people or people from certain ethnic minorities, where the population occurrence is much less than half, it's always going to be feeling like you're in a minority, almost always, unless you're in a very special and unusual program.
Yeah.
So the task for us is to learn to understand that some of these factors that might make us feel like we, quote, don't belong, are structural, are external to us, and to learn some techniques for dealing with them so that we can still do our work, publish our papers, find collaborators, work with them successfully, give good talks, and that sort of thing. So, and some of these are the sorts of techniques that one can learn in various peer groups, in training workshops, in professional development, and so on.
And as a consequence, the 5 women mathematicians who make up the Kirk Visiting Distinguished Fellows this year, it's a good thing. I would imagine I'm putting words in your mouth, but seeing these figures, whatever age you are, whether you're an early career researcher or later in your career, seeing that there are 5 senior women mathematicians who are being given an award to show that they are important speakers in the program and the series and all this kind of stuff can only be a good thing. I would assume from.
I think so. Yes. Yeah. So I think. Of course, it's a personal honour to receive such an award, but the point is, what it means is that you can, when you go out there and you give a good talk, and there are a lot of other women in the audience, they have another instance in front of them of someone who can give a good talk, or who is working as someone who's a woman and who's in the intersection of, mathematician who does interesting work and can talk about it well and is a woman.
Yes.
And so, role models are not the only thing, but they're a good thing to have to support us and to combat some of that imposter syndrome and some of the other structural factors that militate against full participation. Yeah.
Well, thank you very much for your thoughts. There was a lot of insight and a lot of passion. It was really interesting to hear. So thank you again for sharing. I'll let you go shortly, I promise. But perhaps to finish, I could ask you briefly about your experience of being in Cambridge. Because it's an interesting, on a very superficial level, it's a very different landscape to Adelaide, I imagine, although, of course, it is a very rich landscape in South Australia. But how do you find it being here? It is a small city. Is it a pleasant place to be? Have you enjoyed your time here so far?
Very much so. So I have been actually quite busy so far, but I did make time to do a couple of tours of parts of the older parts of the city and some of the colleges, and just to walk around and get my bearings. I rented a bike and I've been riding around a little bit in the countryside. So I have not really been to Cambridge before, except very briefly as a tourist once before. So it's a beautiful place. It's a delightful place. It's very charming. It's full of glorious history. I went to the Fitzwilliam Museum and really enjoyed the exhibits there. And I have much, much, much more to discover, I can see. But I think even on top of all of that culture and history and art and so forth that I'm getting to know a little bit about, it's just a marvellous experience to be at this research institute with a bit of time away from many of my regular daily commitments, to be able to dig a bit deeper and think about some of these problems all day, and to be brought into contact, as I was saying, with world-leading researchers in various allied areas. So it's the Institute has been really carefully planned and well set up to facilitate these sorts of interactions. I can see a lot of things that have been intentionally done and that are working really well. So,
thank you very much for those kind words. I hope it inspires anyone else who's listening here to look up what is happening at the Institute in the near future and applying to join or seeing any workshops which might appeal to them.
Yes, I heard an interesting thing today that, correct me if I'm wrong, but I heard that any UK-based mathematician can spend a couple of days a year at this institute without being formally invited. There's some sort of general expectation. Is that?
Yeah, that's true of the workshops, exactly. So the programmes are by invitation, but the workshops, which are part of the programmes, which are typically a week long, anyone is free to attend for 2 days. You just have to sign in on the day, and we encourage people to do that. That is the point of the building, for collaboration and to get the right minds in the building, so to speak.
So I've visited quite a few mathematical research institutes, mathematical sciences research institutes, and this is the only one I know of that has such a program. And I think that's really helpful in terms of encouraging participation of underrepresented groups, because we know, because of lots of structural mechanisms such as unconscious bias, which we all share, women, for example, are a little less likely to be nominated for programs like this, but and they're also a little less likely to nominate themselves to come to programs like this. But still, this really opens the possibility that you don't have to wait for somebody to decree that you are of the level to come to this. You can just find something you'd like to come to, a workshop here at the Institute, and just sign up and go.
Well, and indeed your talk in 2 weeks' time is open to any member of the public. Now, I'm guessing that, like me, if you don't have a mathematical education, there's a certain amount you can get from it, but perhaps
the first section
is very accessible to
the
first couple
everybody.
of minutes are always brilliant.
It's not very mathematical, the first part.
So even if you are like me, I would encourage you to come and listen to Lesley's talk.
Please do.
But thank you very much for your time again. It's been a real pleasure. Associate Professor Leslie Ward of the University of South Australia, thanks for your time, and I look forward to seeing your talk in 2 weeks.
Thank you.